Story 1. The Bunker in Vietnam. During the height of the Vietnam War in 1969, Corporal James Walker and his squad were sent deep into the jungle near Da Nang. Their orders were to hold position in an old French-built bunker that had been abandoned years earlier. From the outside, the structure looked harmless, overgrown with vines, its concrete walls cracked and weathered. But as soon as the men entered, they all admitted that something about the place felt wrong. That first night, James lay awake listening to the jungle. The usual sounds of insects and frogs were muted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then he heard it. Whispers. Faint at first, like a conversation drifting through the damp air. He assumed it was his squad joking or talking quietly. But when he looked around, every one of his men was asleep, rifles resting at their sides. The whispers grew louder as the night dragged on, echoing through the narrow corridors of the bunker. James decided to check it out, flashlight in one hand and rifle in the other. As he moved deeper, the temperature dropped sharply, the air heavy with a smell like rusted metal and wet soil. Suddenly, at the far end of the hallway, his beam caught something, a figure. It was a soldier, standing motionless, his uniform torn and stained. James froze, aiming his rifle, but when he shouted, the man didn't respond. Instead, the figure turned, its face pale and eyes hollow, and then it simply faded into the wall. James stumbled back, his heart racing. He didn't tell the others what he saw, but the next morning, they all noticed something disturbing. Near the wall where the figure had vanished, there were streaks of dried, dark stains. They looked like blood. Later that day, while speaking to local villagers, the squad learned the bunker had a history. Years earlier, it had been overrun in a violent battle. Dozens of French soldiers had been trapped inside, slaughtered as the enemy stormed in. None of their bodies were ever recovered. That night, more men heard the whispers. Some claimed they felt cold hands brush their shoulders in the darkness. Others swore they saw faces watching from the corners. By the third day, the entire squad begged command to move them elsewhere. Corporal James later confessed that what haunted him most wasn't just the ghostly soldier he had seen. It was the thought that maybe the souls of the fallen were still trapped inside that bunker, forever reliving their last bloody moments. And, to this day, soldiers who pass that part of the jungle say, if you stop and listen closely, you can still hear the whispers of the dead, carried through the ruins of the bunker. Story 2. The Desert Patrol. In 2005, during the height of the Iraq War, Sergeant Michael Harris and his squad were sent on a routine night patrol just outside Fallujah. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, flat, barren, and deathly quiet. The kind of silence that made every sound echo in your skull. At first, it was uneventful. The squad moved cautiously, scanning the horizon, their boots crunching against the sand. But then Private Daniels whispered over the radio, "Sergeant, there's someone out there, at my 2 o'clock." Michael raised his night vision goggles. In the distance, maybe 100 yards away, stood a figure, perfectly still, too far to identify but unmistakably human-shaped. Michael ordered the men to halt. They watched, waiting for movement. But the figure didn't move, not an inch. "Maybe it's a farmer," someone muttered. But in the middle of the desert, at 2 a.m., it didn't make sense. Michael raised his weapon. "Identify yourself," he shouted into the night. No response. He blinked, and the figure was gone. The squad pressed forward, unease growing with every step. Then their radios began to crackle with static. Compasses spun wildly, pointing in every direction but north. That's when they heard it. Screaming. A man's voice shouting in English, "Help me, please!" echoing through the dunes. The squad rushed toward the sound, weapons ready. The screaming grew louder, desperate, and then silence. When they reached the spot, there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of life, just endless sand under the pale moonlight. Later, back at the base, Michael told another platoon about the incident. Their faces went pale. They explained that years earlier, an American unit had been ambushed and killed in that very area. None of their bodies had ever been recovered. Michael and his men never forgot that night. The shadows they saw, the voices they heard, it left them with a chilling thought. What if the desert itself had become a graveyard, and the spirits of the fallen were still out there, crying for help in the darkness, forever trapped in the sands of Iraq? Story 3. The Ghost of Fort Bragg. Back in the United States, not all soldier stories come from the battlefield. Some happen right here at home. At Fort Bragg, North Carolina, there's an old set of barracks that has a dark reputation among soldiers. In 1998, Private Anthony Miller, fresh out of basic training, was assigned to live in that building. At first, it seemed normal. Aged walls, creaky floors, nothing unusual. But it didn't take long for Anthony to realize something was off. Every night around midnight he would hear boots marching in the hallway outside his room. The sound was steady, rhythmic. Left, right, left, right. He assumed it was another soldier pacing the halls, but when he opened the door, the corridor was always empty. One night, curious and frustrated, Anthony decided to wait. He sat on his bed, lights off, listening. And, right on schedule, the footsteps began. This time, he yanked open the door fast. And froze. At the far end of the hallway stood a man in full World War II paratrooper gear. Helmet, boots polished, uniform pristine. The man stood at attention, staring straight ahead. Anthony called out, "Hey, who are you?" The soldier didn't move. Anthony took a step forward, and just like that, the figure vanished into thin air. Shaken, he told his roommates the next morning. Instead of laughing, they nodded. One of them admitted he'd seen the same man weeks earlier. Another said he sometimes woke to the sound of someone standing in his room, breathing heavily, only for no one to be there. Later, Anthony did some digging. He discovered that decades ago, a young paratrooper had died in a training accident inside that very building. He never even made it overseas. Some soldiers believe his spirit still roams the halls, forever preparing for a war he never got to fight. To this day, many at Fort Bragg refuse to sleep in those old barracks alone. Some say at night you can still hear the footsteps, boots marching down the hallway, the ghost of a soldier who never left his post.